the North Mobile Post radio show, and I am your host, David Merrill. Let's get right into the news. Yesterday, Mitt Romney announced his energy policy. As expected, it was heavy in drilling, offshore drilling, fracking, drilling on federal lands. Romney claims his policy will create 3 million jobs and more than $1 trillion in revenue. He plans to make the country energy independent by 2020. We'll have more on that in a bit. In other news, the conflict in Syria claimed 100 more lives yesterday, including 59 civilians, as the regime of Bashar al-Assad continued its assault on rebel forces. To continue on with the news, the Economic Policy Institute yesterday released a study that said the U.S. trade deficit with China has cost us 2.7 million American jobs between 2001 and 2011. We've known for a long time that our trade policy with China has been big trouble, and this puts a figure on that trouble. And roughly 2.1 million of those jobs were in the manufacturing sector. And in a final bit of news, and this is late breaking, it was announced Thursday night, Lance Armstrong has been banned for life from cycling by the USADA, anti-doping agency, and he will be stripped of his 7 Tour de France titles. Armstrong has faced years of scrutiny over this issue, even though he's passed drug test after drug test, and I'll talk about that at length too at the end of the show. But first, let's circle back to Mitt Romney's energy policy. Now, looking at his policy, I saw some good and some bad. The oil industry is a good industry. It creates a lot of jobs. I live on the Gulf Coast, and it creates a lot of jobs here. I know a lot of people that work in the industry, and they're good-paying jobs. This is good for the economy. Last year, the United States became a net exporter of gasoline. We have a lot of refineries in the Gulf region as well, and that has helped lower our trade deficit, our overall trade deficit, which is a good thing thanks to the price of gas. That's one area where the price of gas is actually helping us. The problem with his policy, he claims we will be energy independent by 2020, and this is mostly by expanded drilling. I don't know exactly, I'm not a scientist, I don't know what our oil reserves are, but from what I've always heard, we don't have enough, that we could drill at maximum potential and not satisfy our demand for oil. We simply don't have the reserves. I believe the figures usually say something like, we consume 30% of the world's oil, and we only have 3% of the world's reserves. So drilling, we can't drill our way out of the problem. That's what Barack Obama said when he ran in '08, and that should still be true now. I don't think we've gained any more oil since then. And Romney plans to make us, along with Canada and Mexico, in his speech he said North America, he's going to make North America energy independent in 8 years just by expanded drilling. That seems very far-fetched. Now, like I said, it's good economically. It'll create a lot of jobs if we expanded drilling, and we could export some gasoline. But I think for our own energy policy, we need to begin shifting towards renewable energy. And in particular, I think solar. And it's long been my opinion, solar power is the future. The sun is the most abundant energy source we have, and we have to exploit it. So, we have to get solar technology to where we can create energy at parity with existing technologies. And that's the direction we need to move. Couple that with electric cars, and there you go. There's your system. There's your energy policy. To me, that makes the most sense. It's only logical, and that's the direction we need to go. This obsession with staying on fossil fuels is going to hurt us, because forget about the environmental issues for a minute, and just the fact that we will one day run out of fossil fuels. That's what worries me the most, even more than the environmental issues, is the fact that we're going to run out of fossil fuels at some point in the future, and it's better to have an alternative energy source set up before that happens. We don't want to have a crash, a shock, where all of a sudden, we can't produce enough oil to meet demand. That would be catastrophic to our economy, to our way of life. It's better to have a different system in place now. And Romney did not have a lot on renewable energy sources in his proposal, and that's a little disappointing. I would hope he would have kind of touched on it, and that's one area where President Obama is clearly ahead of him. He's pushing for more renewables. He's put out a lot in the stimulus, a lot of loans to renewable companies, and some went belly up like Solyndra, a very popular case. but I believe that's a step in the right direction. We can't drill our way out of this problem. We have to look towards the future and not always look towards the past. Now, I want to talk a bit at length about this trade issue with China. This is, to me, the biggest reason why we have had a limp recovery from the previous recession. We have been hemorrhaging jobs to third world countries for the past decade, probably longer than the past decade, but it really accelerated in the past decade. And this report from the Economic Policy Institute, which is a labor-friendly leaning group, says 2.7 million jobs. I would probably argue it's more than that. That might be, the trade deficit caused that many job losses. That might be directly, but when you factor in indirect ways, I think the total is much higher, and it's cost the economy so much. And most of these losses were in manufacturing. 2.1 million of the 2.7 million, nearly 77% of those were lost in manufacturing. And manufacturing jobs are very important, and here's why. Generally, manufacturing jobs, they're considered low skill. And that doesn't mean it's easy to do and, any moron can do it. What it means is you don't need a college education to do these types of jobs. And those are important because college is now, expensive. It's very expensive. And even college graduates now are having a hard time finding jobs. So these manufacturing jobs are important because college is not for everyone. Not everyone can afford it. Not everyone has the intelligence even to do it. So we need these types of jobs people can get right out of high school with just a high school education. And it's also important because we need to build things here. We do not need to be at the mercy of other countries. For example, China now controls, I believe, 90% of the rare earth metals market. And that goes into computers, any electronic device. And that is a huge problem that we have allowed them to corner this market. And they do this by undercutting everybody and pricing them out of the market. That's how they've won over all these manufacturing jobs as well. And it's dangerous. They've already, I believe, threatened Japan with this, withheld shipment of these metals in order to get their way on some issue. And that could be a problem in the future. We cannot cede these issues over to China going forward. And at some point, tariffs are going to have to be looked at. I know everybody cries, oh, it's a trade war. Oh, we have to get rid of those jobs. We just have to forget about those jobs. And I believe they're wrong, and that's a losing argument that we should just cede these jobs to China. We need to build things here. We need to get our own materials. We ain't gonna build everything. We want China to be successful as well. They could be great customers for us. We wanna, that's the idea behind free trade. It opens up markets for your economy. The problem is the loophole in free trade is that it became a race to the bottom in terms of labor. Companies, when you get free trade, companies can send their jobs to the cheapest labor market and then just send the products back tax-free, tariff-free to the higher economies, and that's what's happened. And that's no good. It is killing this country. That is our number one economic issue. It hardly ever gets talked about. All we hear is talk about taxes, which are a minute issue when it comes to the business problems in this country. The big issue is demand. We have no demand because we don't have enough high-paying jobs. Until that is fixed, we're going to continue to struggle. And I just don't see a way out of this recession without bringing back some manufacturing jobs to this country. People who have worked in a plant for 20, 30 years and then their job is shipped out, they had a good paying job there. There's no way they're going to replace that. They don't have the education to just move to another job. And if you're 50 years old, 10 to 15 years away from retirement, what are you supposed to do? You worked for 20 years, you built your way up to a nice salary at this place. You have bills to pay that you've charged up thinking you were going to make this amount of money, and now you're expected to live on a Home Depot paycheck. That's not going to work, and that's the problem our economy faces today. And the candidates need to start talking about it. Mitt Romney he's mentioned China a little bit. He's talking tough. He says he's going to label them as a currency manipulator right out of the gate. But President Obama talked tough too, and ultimately did nothing in office. And that seems to be the case usually because big business likes what's going on with China. The big businesses in this country have made a killing. They're sitting on more cash than ever before because they're able to send jobs over to cheaper labor markets. And until our politicians get tough on this practice of offshoring jobs to cheaper labor markets and fix our trade agreements, we don't need free trade agreements, we need fair trade agreements. If a foreign country is employing labor that is cheaper than ours, unfair labor costs, we need to place taxes on it to level the playing field. That's how you fix this. Tariffs that levelize pay. We should not allow these countries to get away with workers that work for slave wages. It's not good for the workers. It's not good for us. And now I want to move on. I want to talk about Lance Armstrong. This is a situation that really bugs me. I don't know if he cheated or not. I know he passed a lot of drug tests, and I'm not sure why they're still following him. He retired in 2011, but he's been dogged by these accusations since he started winning the Tour de France. But it's just really sad to me. This is a guy that was a hero to so many people. You know, his story was so inspiring, and to have him just assaulted all this time, even after passing test after test, he never tested positive for any doping agents, and these doping agencies just kept on him, and it almost seemed like they did not want us to have this hero, to have this guy who overcame cancer to win the Tour de France 7 times, and that it really aggravates me, and it just makes me think there was ulterior motives here. That why couldn't they, really, I don't want anybody to get away with cheating, but really, we needed to have this hero. We needed this guy who overcame cancer that was a symbol. The Lance Armstrong Foundation has raised over $500 million for cancer awareness and research. And this was the guy that they just had to stay on, It's like, give him his tests every year when he was doing his run in the Tour de France. They should have gave him his tests, and that should have been it. But instead, they were on him like the paparazzi. And he is not admitting guilt. He just declined to keep fighting the USADA. That's the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency. He said enough is enough. Literally, his quote was, enough. There comes a point in every man's life where he has to say enough is enough. For me, that time is now. And he called it an unconstitutional witch hunt. So he just got tired of fighting this, and I really don't blame him. For years, this has been following him. And enough is enough. Let them strip the titles. To me, he will be a hero for what he accomplished, not only on the Tour de France, but also for all the work he's done for cancer research, all the cancer awareness, all the money he's raised. He is a hero and an inspiration for all. And that's about going to wrap it up for this show. We'll be back tomorrow with more news, more opinions, and more analysis.